what are ideals? So fx be the ring of multivariate polynomials and n variables over a field f. Usually we'll take it as rationals or finite field. A subring of fx is an ideal if it absorbs polynomial multiplications. So f into I is contained in I. And ideals are finitely generated inside polynomial rings. So given polynomials P1 to Pm, the ideal generated by P1 to Pm essentially is all polynomial combinations of the Pi's. So all f that can be written as summation hi pi, I going from 1 to m. Examples are, say, take the ideal generated by x1 to xn. These are polynomials without constant terms. The ideal generated by xi square minus xi for I going from 1 to n. This is what I'll call the Boolean ideal. This consists of polynomials that vanish on all the Boolean, on the entire Boolean cube, 0, 1 to the n, which is of interest in discrete math. More generally, if S is an arbitrary subset of points inside f to the n, the ideal of all polynomials that vanish on S is another example. Okay. So always I'm going to go back to some graph theory because that's our motivating field, Alon's Nullstellensatz. Okay, so a graph polynomial is defined as follows. You take a simple undirected n vertex graph. You have n variables corresponding to the n vertices. The graph polynomial is simply the product xi minus xj, ij and e, say I less than j. So you don't have both xi minus xj and xj minus xi. So it's a product of cardinality E many linear terms. So it's a product of linear forms. Suppose S is a set of k distinct field elements. Define the univariate polynomial Px to be the product of all the linear factors. So it has k distinct roots, a1, a2, ak. And define pi to be the polynomial in the variable xi, which is basically p of xi. So I have n different polynomials, one for each of the variables x1 to xn. So I could have written pi of xi here, it doesn't matter. So here is an interesting statement. G, the graph G is k colorable if and only if the graph polynomial is not in the ideal generated by P1, P2, Pn or Px1, Px2, Pxn. So if Fg is in the ideal generated by the PIs, I know that Fg can be written as hi pi. So Fg will vanish on the box S cross S cross S n times. Why? Because each of the PIs is 0 in the box and therefore F will vanish on the box. On the other hand, if G is k colorable, I mean, this is the same thing as saying that if G is k colorable, then it is not in the ideal because if it's k colorable, you can choose a partition, the color partition using the k colors, use the AIs for the different color partitions. And if you evaluate the polynomial Fg, when you set xj to AI for xj coming from the ith partition, then Fg is non-zero, so it doesn't vanish on the box. Okay. To prove the converse is essentially Alon's combinatorial Nullstellensatz, the theorem number 1, which says the following, that if S1 to Sn are non-empty subsets of the field F, and Pi is xi minus a, where a runs over Si, and F is any polynomial, in the n variables, f vanishes on the box S1 to Sn implies that f belongs to the ideal. So the forward direction is easy. To prove the converse direction, you need Alon's Null-Still-Ansatz, which is not difficult to prove. Essentially, it is a division algorithm, an algorithmic proof. You can show that if f vanishes on the box, then you can divide out by the pi's and there'll be no remainder left. And in fact, the hi's which you will get when you divide and collect the coefficients will be of degree of f minus degree of pi. Okay. So I hope this example made sense. So therefore, the algorithmic question is naturally interesting because checking whether a graph is k colorable is known to be NP complete. And it amounts to checking whether the graph polynomial is a member of the univariate ideal generated by the polynomials pi. So that's also an at least NP hard problem, and we would like to know when it can be solved efficiently. Alon's second combinatorial Null-Still-Ansatz CN2 is an interesting theorem with a fairly amazing combinatorial applications, which I'll illustrate in a moment. What does the theorem say? If f is a non-zero degree d polynomial, choose any monomial of degree d. Say, let's say the monomial which is non-zero in f, x1 to the e1, x2 to the e2, xn to the en. And choose any subsets of the field f where the size of Si is 1 more than the exponent of xi. So Si is of size ei plus 1. Then f does not vanish on the box S1 cross S2 cross Sn. And the proof is not difficult. It's again a kind of division argument, and it uses the previous Null-Still-Ansatz, which we saw in the k colorability context. So maybe we should quickly mention how it ties up with more general ideal membership questions for arbitrary multivariate polynomials. So let's quickly recall that just to place it in the right context, though we'll never really use it. Suppose G1 to Gm are m arbitrary multivariate polynomials in the variables x1 to xn. Define the common zeros, or the vanishing set, or the variety of G1 to Gm as all points A where all the GIs vanish. Then Hilbert's Null-Still-Ansatz tells you in a more general setting exactly when a polynomial f has its zeros vanishing on the common zeros of G1 to Gm. You need f to be an algebraically closed field, which means all univariates factor over f. Then it says that f vanishes on the common zeros of G1 to Gm if and only if some power of f lies in the ideal generated by G1 to Gm. Okay. So for Alon's Null-Still-Ansatz, you don't need f to be algebraically closed. Any field f would do. The exponent k is required because you can see from this example, there's a single polynomial g, which is x square, and f could be x. And algebraically closed is also required. Okay, I won't say more about this. Let's move on. So we have set the algebraic basics. So here is a graph theory application of Alon's Null-Still-Ansatz, one of the amazing applications. I want to try and explain that to you, a take-home thing from this talk, even if you take home nothing else. So suppose P is a prime and G is a graph whose average degree is strictly more than 2P minus 2. So by average degree, what we mean is add up all the degrees, divide by the total number of vertices, that's strictly more than 2P minus 2. On the other hand, the maximum degree of the graph G is bounded by 2P minus 1. So the degrees are kind of hovering around 2P minus 2. A few could be a little less. The average is more than 2P minus 2. Maximum is bounded by 2P minus 1. then the theorem is that G has a p-regular subgraph. It's not an induced subgraph. It may not have too many vertices in it, but it's a p-regular subgraph. It's a subgraph in which every vertex has degree exactly p. This theorem is kind of motivated by an older result of Allon and I think Furedi and Kleitman, which says that if G is a graph, a regular, four regular graph, every vertex has degree 4 in it, then it has a subgraph that is 3 regular. I will tell you the connection in a moment. So this is the example setting where we're going to apply this theorem of Allon. Take the graph G. G is 4 regular means the average degree is exactly 4. So P is 3, 2 into 3 minus 2. And I want the average degree to be more than 2p minus 2, so I'll add another edge to the graph G. So I consider the graph G plus E. And this theorem tells me that G plus E has a 3 regular subgraph. So without the edge E, it's a long proof. And with this, there is a magical proof due to Allon's CN2, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. So all you have to do is to dream up the following polynomial in this multivariate polynomial ring over the field Fp. You have one variable for every edge in the graph. And the dreamed up polynomial is the following: product over all vertices, 1 minus summation over all the edges that contain the vertex v raised to the power p minus 1. So that when you set it to scalars to the power p minus 1, if it's non-zero, it will evaluate to 1 by Fermat's little theorem, minus product of 1 minus xe, where e runs over all the edges. Okay, so this is the dreamed up polynomial. Let's analyze it. First thing to see is that the highest degree monomial is coming from the second term, namely from this term, product of x sub e with the minus 1 to the something as constant. Why is that? It's because the average degree is strictly more than 2p minus 2. So here what will happen is that you will have p minus 1 into the degree of e into n, and because every edge is going to be counted twice, it will be 2p minus 2 into n. And when you divide by n, since the average degree is more than that, so here you will be left with 2p minus 2 when you divide by n. And here the total number of edges by divided by 2 will give you the actual degree. Divided by 2n will give you the actual average degree. So that will be more than this. And that's why product of x sub e will be more than this from the average degree assumption. Okay, so since the highest degree monomial is product of x sub e, and it's the exponents are all 1. If you remember from Allon's combinatorial Nullstellensatz, if you take the largest degree monomial and look at the exponents, you need to choose subsets of size 1 more than the degree of each exponent. So we'll choose 0, 1 as our subsets. So Allon's combinatorial Nullstellensatz says that there is a point in 0, 1 to the cardinality E where f does not vanish. That point has to be a non-zero point because f at all zeros is 0, because at all zeros it's 1 minus 1. You have a 1 from the first term and a 1 from the second term. So it can't be the all zeros point, so it must be a non-zero point. And now simply take all the edges E such that a sub e is 1, and those edges will define the subgraph H. Why is it p regular? We'll see in a moment. Since it's non-zero, the second term is going to be 0 because 1 minus a sub e is going to be 0 for for an A sub B that is 1. So the first one, all these terms, summation x sub B V in E must be 0. Otherwise, this product would also vanish. That means summation V sub V in E x sub E must be a multiple of P. And since the degree is at most 2P minus 1, it should be either 0 or P. All of them can't be 0 because all the A sub B's are not 0. So there must be vertices that are of degree P in the graph H. So that gives the P regular subgraph. So H will turn out to be P regular subgraph if you pick all A sub B's which are 1. So that's a proof. Amazing. I hope you enjoyed the proof. Let's move on to business. So here's one more curious thing about connections between ideals and combinatorics. Here's a very interesting result of Lova's. It's not a univariate ideal. It's basically the edge ideal. You have a graph G and take all monomials of degree 2 which correspond to edges. So Ig is ideal generated by xi into xj where ij is an edge, and make it Boolean by throwing in the Boolean conditions. So that the 0 set of the ideal is inside the Boolean cube. So we write f is greater than or equal to 0 mod ig if for all the zeros of the vanishing set, f of a is non-negative. Okay. And now comes an amazing theorem of Lova's. It says that the graph G is perfect. Perfect means that the chromatic number coincides with the clique number of the graph for every induced subgraph. So graph G is perfect if and only for every linear form f is greater than or equal to 0 mod ig, 0 is missing here, if and only if f is a sum of squares of linear forms modulo ig. Amazing theorem, which has opened up a huge field of semi-definite programming, sum of squares, and so on. This is going back to the early 1990s, result of Lova's. Okay, so let's move on to the ideal membership problem and its complexity. So given polynomials P1, P2, Pm, and F by circuits, by arithmetic circuits. So this is something that I won't explain in detail, but these are normally you can represent a polynomial in different ways. One is a sparse representation, where you can write down the polynomial explicitly as a linear combination of monomials. Another is a more implicit representation, which is like a circuit or a formula sometimes, where you give a kind of a straight line program description of how the polynomial will be computed with additions and multiplications. And that can be a much more compact representation of the polynomial. So the problem is to determine whether f is in the ideal generated by the PIs. That is the ideal membership problem. And in general, it's a very hard problem computationally. It is exponential space complete, which I won't describe here. What it really means is that you not only require exponential time, exponential being measured in the size of the input, but you require exponential space, which typically would mean double exponential time. And motivated by Alon's combinatorial Null-Ansatz, we consider it for univariate ideals. As I already explained, here is another variety of the same where you have the polynomials xi power k minus 1 over rationals, let's say, so that they have k different roots. And you know that the problem is at least co-NP hard because G is not k colorable if and only if Fg is in this ideal, in the graph polynomial. So univariate ideal membership testing is at least co-NP hard. And we would like to explore situations where it can be solved more efficiently. Okay, so go dig a little deeper into the complexity of univariate ideal membership testing. So here is a simple case where we can design a very easy algorithm. Suppose the polynomial f is given in sparse representation. So it's given explicitly as a linear combination of its monomials. And then what, as I explained earlier also when I stated the combinatorial Nullstellensatz, you can essentially test whether f is an I or not by dividing by the pi's one by one. Only thing you have to worry about is how big does the remainder grow. Normally, you can't do that. Here in the general ideal membership, you can't do that because it may be a never terminating process unless you choose a very good basis for the ideal. What is called a Grosvenor basis, for example, carefully chosen basis, and then you can implement a division algorithm. The whole problem is that that nice basis could be enormous. But here, these polynomials are already a ready-made, what is called a Grosvenor basis, and you can simply divide f by the polynomials one by one and get a unique remainder. So in particular, all you need to do here is take these monomials and look at each xi power whatever EIR and divide by the corresponding PIXI, which is a generator of the ideal I. You will get a remainder whose degree is less than Pi's degree. What will happen is that this summation will be R going from 1 to n and alpha R into a product of univariate polynomials. So QIRs will be univariate polynomials. So this is something that I can write down compactly, but how do I know whether f mod I, the remainder, is 0 or not? So one thing we can do is uh, a very simple generalization of the fundamental theorem of algebra, which in computer science we call the Schwartz-Zippel lemma. What you say is that if f is a non-zero degree D polynomial, then you choose a finite subset of the field elements, which is say twice the size of the degree, is twice the degree of the polynomial or something like that. You can easily prove that inside the box S cross S cross S n times, the total number of zeros of f is bounded by D into cardinality S to the n minus 1. So if I randomly pick a point from the box S cross S cross S, the probability that I will be non-zero is at least 1 minus D by cardinality S. So if cardinality S is say something like 2D, then with probability 1/2, I'll hit upon a point where f is non-zero. But actually, in this particular case, you can even do it in deterministic polynomial time. I won't go into the details. It's because this is a product of univariate polynomials. You can exploit that structure and give a more efficient algorithm. So this is a simple case. Moving on, I'm going to tackle a few more, some more general cases. So the next case that I want to look at is when the polynomial f has small rank. So what does it mean to say polynomial f has small rank? F in x1, x2, xn has small rank if f really is a polynomial in only R variables. So there are R linear forms L1, L2, Lr, and there is an R variate polynomial G of the same degree as f, so that f of x is actually G of L1, L2, Lr. For example, fx could be x square plus y square plus 2xy, and it's actually of rank 1, as you know. Fxy is x plus y whole square. So fxy is a rank 1 polynomial. So given a rank R polynomial, what we can prove is that given a rank R polynomial f of degree D and a univariate ideal, then in randomized time, essentially D power R, we can test whether f is in the ideal or not. So if R is small, then this can be a fast algorithm. That is the idea. And it's really, there are two ways to look at it. It's if you do a careful division algorithm, you will get this randomized D power R algorithm. So essentially, it's randomized because you will pick a random point and evaluate it there, and you will evaluate it evaluate the remainder carefully by doing a careful division. You will not substitute. You will divide and substitute, taking R of these PIs at a time carefully. But there is a quick way to describe this algorithm, which is that Since G is a polynomial essentially in R variables and it's of degree D, G has at most D plus R choose R many monomials. And if you substitute the linear forms for the variables of G, F will really look like a D plus R choose R sum of products of linear forms of degree D. The linear forms are in L1 to LR. And we can exploit that, because what we can do is if you take a single linear form and raise it to a power, you can very easily divide it by univariate polynomials, because a single linear form raised to a power can be written as a sum of product of univariate polynomials, the same kind as appeared here. Remember in the previous theorem that I showed here. It can be, so if F was a power of a linear form, you can always express it as a sum of product of univariates over rationals and over smaller fields with a little more work. So once you can do that, you can easily divide those univariate polynomials by the PIs, and you will get hold of the remainder polynomial as a sum of D plus R choose R sum of product of univariates, and you can then either do a random substitution or do a more clever algorithm to get a D power R time algorithm. I hope that made sense. It doesn't matter because I rushed through it. I'm going to tell you some nice example applications of this, which will make sense, hopefully. So the first is the permanent polynomial. So recall that the permanent of an n by n matrix is the sum of products, sum over all permutations in Sn of products of the form A sub I sigma I. Sigma is the permutation. So this is essentially like the determinant except for the sign term. That makes all the difference because the permanent is a hard to compute object. It's by a celebrated result of Valiant. It's what is called Sharpe complete over the field of rational numbers and over fields of characteristic different from 2. It is, if the characteristic is P, it is what is called mod P complete. For characteristic 2, it coincides with the determinant and it's easy. The interesting thing is that the permanent can be expressed as the remainder modulo the following univariate ideal. You take LIs as corresponding to the rows of the matrix A multiplied by these introduced introduced indeterminates. So LIs are these linear forms which correspond to the LI corresponds to the ith row. Take the product of all these linear forms, go modulo the ideal which kills everything that's of exponent more than 1. It turns out that the coefficient of the single multilinear term in this polynomial, which is the product, is the permanent, and it's not difficult to see this. So how is our theorem going to be applied? So it's known to be hard, because it's Sharpe complete. We don't expect any easy algorithm to check whether the product of LIs is in the ideal I, because that tantamounts to checking that the permanent is 0. Over rationals, it is like checking whether it's what is called C equals P hard. Okay, it's checking, it's like if you have a matrix A with rational entries with both positive and negative entries, checking whether the permanent is 0 is a hard problem. Okay. On the other hand, if A is a small rank matrix, then this polynomial, which is a product of L1 to Ln, is a small rank polynomial in the sense that I explained in the previous slide. So applying our algorithm, you would get an O star n to the R time algorithm to compute the permanent of A for rank R matrices. And it works over all fields. So here is another application of the same. Suppose G is a graph and I'm interested in computing a small vertex cover of G. What is a vertex cover? It's a subset of vertices such that for every edge in the graph, at least one endpoint is in that subset. And the minimum vertex cover problem is a standard NP-hard problem. So to find the minimum vertex cover is a hard problem. It turns out that if the adjacency matrix of G has rank R, then we can use our algorithm, our univariate ideal membership algorithm, to check in randomized n to the R time to find a minimum vertex cover in randomized n to the R time. How do we do that? And here is the quick description of it. So let's say AG is the adjacency matrix of the graph G, and it's of rank R. We'll take the ideal to be the Boolean ideal, so that the zero set is 0, 1 to the n. And dream up this polynomial or the product of f and g. F is a product of these linear forms, product of summation xi minus t going from 0 to n minus k minus 1. And G is product going from S going from 1 to n choose 2, this quadratic form. And the row vector consisting of x1, x2, xn, the column vector consisting of x1, x2, xn, the adjacency matrix in the middle, minus S. So we note that the quadratic form really is summation xi xj, where ij belongs to the edge set. And the claim is that the product fg is in the ideal I if and only if G has a vertex cover of size k. How do we see that? Okay, so for a vector in this Boolean cube, we are going to associate the subset S consisting of all the points I for which AI is 0. That is going to be our candidate vertex cover. Notice that for the polynomial f to be non-zero, the cardinality of S should be at most k, because if it is more than k, summation of xi will be at most n minus k minus 1, and f will be 0. So f into g will be 0 then. So we can't satisfy this. And for the other part, notice that the quadratic form is essentially xi into xj, and it will not vanish if there is some edge xi xj which is uncovered by the vertex cover S. So if both endpoints are non-zero, that will contribute at least a 1 to this. And since the summation is from 1 to n choose 2, this will be killed. G will be killed if there is some edge that is not hit, that is not covered by the vertex cover. On the other hand, if the vertex cover covers every edge, then this summation will be 0 and this product will be whatever it is, a product of minus S going from 1 to n choose 2. So that's the proof. And to see that the rank of FG is at most, it's actually R plus 1. The reason is that here there's only one linear form that is occurring in F, namely summation xi. And to see that this is of rank, to even discover the linear forms, we simply make use of the fact that AAG is a symmetric matrix and diagonalize it. And the diagonalizing transformation will give us the R linear forms that we want. When we diagonalize it, there will be only R non-zero diagonal entries because it's of rank R. AG is symmetric, so you can diagonalize it. So that's the proof of correctness of this algorithm. Okay. There's another application, but maybe I will, yeah, okay, maybe it's interesting. Let me tell you quickly. So this is an application of counting the number of Hamilton circuits in a small rank graph. In general, counting the number of Hamilton circuits in a graph is what is called a Sharpe complete problem. It's like computing the permanent of an integer matrix. So if the adjacency matrix is of rank R, we can again do it efficiently using our algorithm. Here is the trick. You let D be the diagonal matrix with the variables x1 to xn on the diagonal. Take the matrix D into AG, raise it to the power n, and take the trace of that matrix. So the diagonal entries of D into AG will essentially correspond to D into AG to the power n, will correspond to all closed walks of length n. And those closed walks which correspond to Hamilton circuits will be the ones that don't repeat the variables. So the coefficient of x1 to xn will be n times the number of Hamilton circuits. So that's essentially the proof. Again, the ideal I will be, since we're interested only in the multilinear term, the ideal I will be x1 square to xn square. So computing h modulo I. So a little bit of work is required to argue that this polynomial is of small rank, which you can bound the rank by r square. So it will actually yield an O star into the R square algorithm. Okay, so moving on, what happens when f is small degree? In the next few minutes, I'll quickly summarize. 5 minutes between you and lunch, I guess. So as I told you, if f is of degree d, then in sparse representation, you have n plus d choose d terms. And so you can test if f is an I in time O star n to the d by that brutal division algorithm. Can we do better is the question when f is of small degree. So here are some special cases when we can do better. I'll try and give an idea of the proof. So suppose f is a polynomial of degree d, and we need the rationals here. And we consider the special univariate ideal where every polynomial pi has a single root multiple with multiplicity, or the ideal is x1 to the e1, x2 to the e2, xn to the en. Then it turns out that there is a randomized 2e power d algorithm essentially to decide whether f is an I or not. And since the ideal is essentially kills all monomials without leaving any remainders behind, where any variable is of exponent more than the prescribed exponent in the ideal, what we are looking for is chopping off all the higher degree terms of the polynomial f and asking whether the lower degree part is non-zero. So searching for a monomial of that kind, it turns out we can apply a technique based on perfect hash functions due to Alon, Euster, and Zwick. It's called color coding. Or just to give you an idea how the number e appears here, e power d is d power, essentially d power d by d factorial. That's e power d. That's the reason it occurs here. D power d is the total number of functions from a domain of size d to range of size d. And d factorial is the number of bijections. So a perfect hash function would be something that is mapping n variables to d colors such that any subset of d variables, one of the hash functions will perfectly hash. So it turns out that there is a small hash family of size essentially 2e power d, which can be used to detect such terms. Okay, it's a very hand-wavy description of how that algorithm would work. Second one is the other extreme example. It's a radical ideal. All the polynomials are flat, no multiple roots. And in fact, all the roots are over rationals. I mean, all the roots are in Q. So in this case, we can save on the exponent. Instead of a brutal n power d algorithm, we can do it in time O star n power d by 2. Unfortunately, we don't have a hardness result in this case. And we don't know how to improve on the n power d by 2 either in this case. Okay, moving on. We could also consider ideal membership where the number of variables is small. So it's parameterized in the number of variables. So suppose there is a small number of variables, we don't put any small bound on the degree of f. How hard is univariate ideal membership testing? It turns out that it is still hard. What does it mean to say it's W1 hard? Essentially, it means that you can't do better than n power k in running time, or d power k if the degree of the polynomial f is d. And since this is graph theoretic, let me just give you a reduction from the k independent set problem to this. And with that, I guess I'll wind up my talk quickly. So since it's a reduction, it should be nice for you to listen to it. So suppose G is an n vertex graph and K is a parameter. What I want to do is I want to convert the K independent set instance of G to an ideal, a univariate ideal I and a polynomial F with a property that F is not in the ideal I if and only if G has an independent set of size K. So the ideal I is going to be these degree n polynomials which have these n roots. The roots are 1 to n. So they are identical polynomials except that the variables are x1 to xk. Define the polynomial d to be one that makes sure that the variables are distinct. So this polynomial stipulates that the choices of the variables x1 to xk are distinct. So the idea is that x1 to xk is going to, the value that you assign to them is going to pick out an independent set from the graph G. And the polynomial f is the following. For every j is missing here. For every I less than j between 1 and k, and for every edge uv in the edge set E, include xi minus u square plus xj minus v square and put the other way around also. Xj minus u square plus xi minus v square, this product. This product will vanish if the value that we assign to x1, x2, xk, there is some edge uv which is between two such values, xi and xj. That means there are two vertices whose two endpoints are connected by an edge. Then one of these terms will vanish. Otherwise, f will not vanish. So in short, the polynomial f into d will not vanish on the cube n cross n cross n k times, precisely when the graph G has an independent set of size k. Or in other words, f is not in the ideal I precisely when G has an independent set of size k. I never told you the general complexity of univariate ideal membership testing. It's much easier than the EXP space completeness of general ideal membership testing, but it's pretty hard. Over rationals, it is in something that's like non-determinism equipped with asking counting queries. In the over finite fields, it is easier. It's like randomized counting modulo k. K is the characteristic of the finite field. So with that, I've exhausted my time and I've come to the end of my talk. So if you're interested in more, here is an interesting open question. I know very little about polynomials of degree d, the complexity of univariate ideal membership. Can we solve it in 2 power O star 2 power order d time, or even d power d time? Or on the other hand, can we reduce, say, the d independent set problem to it? And for people who are interested in reading more about connections between ideal membership and combinatorial questions, Noga Alone's famous paper is there. Lova's very interesting paper is there. And there's a whole lot of other literature. So with that, I'll come to a stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Arvind. So the audience can ask questions. They can unmute and ask Professor Arvind.
looks like I don't want to stand between lunch and them. So the
There is somebody has already raised his hands.
Oh, aren't they able to unmute? Okay, let me see. You know the name of the person? I cannot see any raised hand.
I have a small question.
sure.
Arvind, you mentioned about the characterization of perfect graphs using ideals.
Oh yeah.
Why is that ideal theory interesting in terms of for perfect graphs at least?
Why is that interesting?
Yeah,
It is.
there are already some nice characterization of perfect graphs.
Yes, that's right. No, it's just this characterization of perfect graphs is just a curiosity. It's I mentioned it only as a very surprising connection. That's all.
Okay. There are.
So Arvind, since the audience isn't asking anything,
Yeah,
I have a question.
sure.
So when you stated the upper bound to be in counting hierarchy,
Yeah.
will this improve if you look at the Nullstellensatz question for univariate ideal membership? So you don't want F to be in the ideal, but some power of F in the ideal.
Okay. So in the case when the ideal is a radical ideal and all the PIs are distinct
Yes.
roots, in that case over rationals we can improve it. We can get so checking whether F is not in the ideal, we can get an NP bound over rationals.
Oh, you get NP. And is it NP or AM?
We get an NP bound. We can get an NP bound. Checking whether, yeah. But over finite fields, because the reason is we can approximate roots. We don't actually need to go to the, so the polynomials PI could be having irrational roots, only they don't have multiple roots. In that case, we can get an NP bound. It's by using good approximations of roots and checking that F cannot get anywhere near that.
Oh, I see.
So using that we can get an NP bound. On the other hand, if the PIs are form a radical ideal, but the field is a finite field, we have a problem because maybe we need to figure out a suitable way of doing approximations so that we don't need to go to an extension field that is too large, where all the PIs split.
But this NP bound, do you expect it to be NP hard or better than NP?
It's
smaller
not,
than NP?
It can't be better than NP. I think it's already NP hard, even when the roots are from rationals.
I see. Okay. But still, this is an improvement over the general result for Nullstellensatz because general is AM under GRH.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. Pascal Coirant's result. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. So last chance to the audience if they want to ask questions. Does anybody see any raised hand? Then I can unmute them. But I don't see any raised hand.
Already. Yeah, the participants can unmute.
Right. Yes. Yeah, they have the permission. Okay then.
So maybe
okay,
my talk was crystal clear. Okay, thank you.
Yes, it was. Yes.
Good.
Yeah. So we thank Arvind again for the crystal clear talk.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nitin and Arvind, and we will assemble back at 2:30 for the invited talk by Oswin and Suri. So have a nice lunch and come back.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
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 Manoj,